Who is Isabella Guzman? In the quiet town of Aurora, Colorado, a crime so shocking, it's hard to fathom. An 18-year-old girl, Isabella Guzman, savagely murdered her own mother. In the year 2013, the tranquility of this small town was shattered by a crime that was as incomprehensible as it was horrifying. A young, seemingly ordinary teenager, Isabella Guzman, turned into a perpetrator of a heinous act that would forever taint her life and that of the community she lived in. The victim, her own mother, the very person who gave her life. Imagine, a mother, her heart filled with love for her child, blissfully unaware that her end was near and at the hands of her own flesh and blood. The details of the crime are as chilling as they are heartbreaking, a stark reminder of how the human mind can descend into a dark abyss, driving one to commit the unthinkable. In the aftermath of the crime, as the grisly details unfolded, the world watched in shock and disbelief. But the story of Isabella Guzman took an even more bizarre turn. Years later, she found herself the subject of internet fame, her court appearance becoming a viral sensation on TikTok, a social media platform. A young girl, a brutal crime, and an unexpected leap to internet fame. The elements of this strange tale are as puzzling as they are disturbing. As we delve deeper into the life of Isabella Guzman, we will explore the factors that led to that fateful day, the day she committed a crime that shocked the world. This is the chilling story of Isabella Guzman, a teenager turned murderer. To understand this horrific act, we must delve into Isabella's past. Isabella Guzman was not always the face of a chilling crime story. She was once just a young girl navigating the tumultuous journey of adolescence in Aurora, Colorado. But her journey was far from ordinary. Isabella's early life was marked by instability and turmoil, a storm brewing beneath a seemingly tranquil surface. Her parents' marriage crumbled when she was just a child, adding to the chaos that was already her life. The divorce was more than just a separation of two people. It was the division of a family, a fissure that would leave lasting marks. Isabella was caught in the middle, a pawn in a game of adult bitterness and resentment. Her mother, a formidable figure in her life, was alleged to have abused Isabella. These allegations, however, are shrouded in mystery, with no concrete proof to substantiate them. Yet they add another layer of complexity to the already troubled relationship between mother and daughter. As she navigated her way through this storm, signs of mental instability began to emerge. Isabella was not just a troubled teenager, she was a young girl wrestling with demons that were far too powerful for her tender years. Her erratic behavior, her sudden mood swings, and her volatile relationship with her mother were all telltale signs of an underlying mental health issue. But like many tragedies, the signs were ignored, dismissed as teenage rebellion or growing pains. Few could have predicted the catastrophe that was looming on the horizon. As Isabella grew older, the cracks in her relationship with her mother began to widen. What was once a troubled relationship was about to become the backdrop of a horrifying act that would shock the world. The turmoil at home began to take a toll on Isabella's mental health. The once vibrant girl, full of life, began to exhibit signs of distress. A change in behavior, sudden outbursts, and an eerie detachment from reality became her new normal. Isabella was spiraling, and those around her could only watch in helpless despair. The mind, a complex labyrinth, had trapped her in its darkest corners, and it wasn't long before a diagnosis followed. Schizophrenia, a severe mental disorder characterized by distortions in thinking, perception, emotions, language, sense of self, and behavior. In Isabella's world, the line between reality and fantasy had blurred, and the voices in her head became her unwelcome companions. She was living in a constant state of fear, battling demons that existed only in her mind. Every day was a struggle, a fight to keep the madness at bay. But the voices grew louder, their demands more insistent. The illness was like a puppeteer, pulling at her strings, manipulating her actions. It was a destructive force, tearing apart her sanity piece by piece. And the more she tried to fight it, the stronger it seemed to become. The world as she knew it was disintegrating, replaced by a terrifying reality crafted by her own mind. Schizophrenia is a cruel master. It doesn't play fair. It distorts, confuses, and frightens. It isolates its victims, locking them in a world of chaos and fear. And for Isabella, it became the driving force behind her unthinkable actions. The whispers in her mind, the hallucinations, the paranoia, they all played a role in the tragic events that were to unfold. Isabella was not well, her mind a ticking time bomb. The voices were her reality, the paranoia was her truth, the hallucinations were her world, and in the midst of this turmoil, a dark plan began to take shape. Little did anyone know the worst was yet to come. On one fateful night in 2013, the tension reached a breaking point. The evening was like any other in the Guzman household in Aurora, Colorado. But beneath the surface of normalcy, a storm was brewing, a tempest of emotional turmoil and mental instability that would soon unleash itself in the most horrific way imaginable. Isabella Guzman, the 18-year-old daughter, a girl who had been battling her own demons, had reached the end of her tether. The tension between her and her mother had been escalating, a silent war that was about to break its silence in the most tragic way. The details of that night are chilling, a haunting testament to the savagery of the crime. Isabella, armed with a knife, approached her mother. What followed was a display of unimaginable brutality, a shocking act that would forever change the course of their lives. The violence was intense, the attack relentless. The quiet home was transformed into a scene of terror, the echoes of the struggle reverberating within its walls. Isabella's actions spoke volumes of the depth of her disturbance, painting a horrifying picture of a young woman lost in the grip of a mental illness she could not control. When the dust settled and the echoes of the struggle faded away, a grim reality set in. The mother, who had given life to her daughter, now lay lifeless, a victim of her own flesh and blood. The mother's life, once filled with dreams and aspirations, was cruelly snuffed out, leaving behind a vacuum filled with shock, sorrow, and unanswered questions. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, the magnitude of the tragedy began to sink in. The household that once reverberated with the sounds of a family was now filled with a deafening silence, a grim reminder of the horror that had unfolded within its walls. In an act of unimaginable brutality, Isabella's mother was dead. In the aftermath of the murder, shockwaves rippled through Aurora. A city tugged into a chilling reality, a community grappling with a crime that was beyond comprehension. The tranquility of this Colorado town was shattered, its serenity replaced with a profound sense of dread and disbelief. Isabella Guzman, the girl next door, was now behind bars. The 18-year-old who had once been a part of this community was now its most infamous resident. As the news spread, there was a collective gasp, a shared feeling of horror. People shook their heads, trying to reconcile the image of the young woman they thought they knew with the reality of what she had done. The arrest of Isabella was swift, as was the start of her trial. The process was meticulous, every detail of the crime examined, every piece of evidence scrutinized. The courtroom became a stage for a story that was as tragic as it was terrifying. The prosecution painted a picture of a troubled teen, a girl who had descended into a darkness so deep that it had led her to commit the unthinkable. The community's response was a mix of fear, anger, and sorrow. There were those who were outraged, those who were frightened, and those who mourned the loss of a life taken too soon. The shock of the crime was magnified by the person behind it, a young woman, barely an adult, capable of such a violent act. As Isabella stood in the dock, her face impassive, her gaze distant, the magnitude of her actions began to settle in. This was not a scene from a horror movie, it was real life. And as the trial progressed, the question on everyone's lips was not just about guilt or innocence, but about understanding. Understanding how a young woman could have strayed so far, understanding what could have driven her to such a horrific act. As Isabella stood in court, the reality of what she'd done began to sink in. The girl who had once lived a seemingly ordinary life was now the subject of a story that was anything but ordinary. The aftermath of the crime was not just about justice. It was about a community trying to make sense of a senseless act. As the trial began, the question on everyone's mind was, why? The court was abuzz with anticipation, each person present grappling with the chilling reality of the case. Isabella Guzman, a young woman of just 18 years, stood accused of an unthinkable crime, the brutal murder of her mother. The trial was a whirlwind of testimonies, evidence, and expert analyses, but the crux of the story lay in Isabella's plea, not guilty by reason of insanity. She, through her defense, claimed to be a victim of schizophrenia, a severe mental disorder that skews one's perception of reality. The court was faced with a daunting task. Was Isabella Guzman a cold-blooded killer, or a young woman ensnared by the throes of a devastating mental illness? The answer to this question would determine her fate. Expert witnesses were called to the stand. Psychiatrists and psychologists who delved into the intricate workings of Isabella's mind. They painted a picture of a young woman plagued by paranoia, delusions, and hallucinations, symptoms characteristic of schizophrenia. The defense argued that Isabella was not in control of her actions on that fateful night, her mind held hostage by her illness. On the other side, the prosecution argued for justice, for a life taken too soon. They questioned the validity of the insanity plea, pushing for a conviction. The courtroom was a battleground, the scales of justice wavering between mental illness and a horrifying crime. In the end, the court's decision was to commit Isabella to a mental health institution. The verdict was met with a mix of relief and dissatisfaction. Some believed justice had been served, while others questioned whether Isabella had truly been held accountable for her actions. Isabella Guzman, once a normal teenager, was now a permanent resident of a mental institution. The trial may have ended, but the questions, the shock, and the haunting memory of the crime lingered, casting a long, dark shadow over the tale of Isabella Guzman. Isolated from the world, Isabella's life took another unexpected turn. In the stark confines of the Colorado Mental Health Institute in Pueblo, Isabella Guzman began a new chapter of her life. A world far removed from the one she once knew, a world where the echoes of her past actions reverberated through the sterile corridors and into the hearts of her caregivers. In this institution, Isabella found herself grappling with the realities of her mental illness. She pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity due to schizophrenia, a diagnosis that sparked a myriad of treatments and therapies. Over time, Isabella claimed to have brought her schizophrenia under control, a statement that led her to petition for release in 2020. But control over one's mind is a slippery concept, especially for someone with a past as dark as hers. While the walls of the institution kept her isolated, the outside world found a way to infiltrate her life. A court appearance video of Isabella began circulating on TikTok, the global video sharing platform. As the clip spread like wildfire, Isabella Guzman became an internet sensation, her infamy reaching corners of the globe she could never have imagined. This TikTok phenomenon, however, was not a celebration of Isabella's life. It was a morbid fascination, a voyeuristic glimpse into a life marred by tragedy and violence. Viewers were drawn to the chilling image of a young woman, seemingly ordinary, yet capable of such heinous acts. Her story served as a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity and the fragility of the human mind. Despite her newfound fame, Isabella remains confined, a haunting reminder of a crime too terrible to forget. Her story continues to unfold within the institution's walls, under the watchful eyes of her caregivers, and in the minds of millions who encountered her through a viral video. The TikTok phenomenon has faded, but Isabella Guzman remains, a chilling testament to the unpredictability of life and the enduring power of a haunting story. 7 years on, the specter of that horrific night still looms large. Isabella Guzman, now a permanent resident of the Colorado Mental Health Institute in Pueblo, continues to live in the shadow of her past. Despite her claims of having her schizophrenia under control, her petition for release in 2020 was met with a resounding no, leaving her confined within the institution's walls. Her days are marked not by the passing of time, but by the relentless reminders of her crime. The public too has not forgotten. Her face, forever linked to that gruesome act, haunts the digital landscape, sparking debates and discussions that show no signs of abating. Yet, it is not just Isabella's life that's been irrevocably altered. The ripples of her actions have left an indelible mark on those who knew her, forever scarred by the knowledge of what she did. The story of Isabella Guzman serves as a chilling reminder of the depths to which the human mind can plunge when pushed to its limits. Thank you for watching, and watch our other 2 videos showing up on the screen right now. It will definitely fascinate you. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel.